There are too many politicians who really don't like the people very much, and the people feel it. People aren't stupid. They may not be highly educated. They may not be as articulate as you would want the people to be. Yeah. But you know what? They have real jobs and real lives, and stuff they've got to get done that doesn't involve politics. And if somebody who wants to be successful in politics doesn't understand that he or she needs to get out and just connect with people, then frankly, I don't think they deserve to win. And they certainly don't deserve to represent anybody because they don't know who they're talking about.
Welcome in Restartup Stories. This day is going to be a very special podcast because, first of all, I'm going to be moderator, which is not happening very often. Second, it's going to be in English, all of it in English. And third, we have a very special guest today. It's my good friend, mentor, and former boss, actually, Jan Surotchak. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You don't know, but Jan was my boss, and we spent some very nice years in International Republican Institute.
We did.
Which was, and still is, the organization that is helping to spread democracy worldwide. It was based in 80s after the speech by Ronald Reagan in Westminster, which actually drafted the course for IRI and other organizations that are doing this kind of very good job in Europe and other regions of the world. But you started there in 1994.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Many years ago.
Came to Slovakia in the summer of 1994 on what was supposed to be a 4-month assignment. You'll remember in those days, the Mečiar government had fallen. There was an interim government under Moravčík. And there were going to be elections in September. I can't remember the date, September 28th, maybe, something like that. And the National Endowment for the United States, National Endowment for Democracy in the United States, gave IRI, the International Republican Institute, a small grant to do some work with center-right political parties here. Actually, not just center-right, across the spectrum, in advance of those elections in September. So I came over on what was supposed to be a 4-month assignment and ended up here for almost 30 years.
30 years, and meanwhile, you changed a lot of offices or a lot of roles inside IRI. So you served as a regional director for the Europe.
So we ran a purely Slovak program here until 1998.
Elections, right?
You're another big election, right? Slovakia had big elections pretty much every time.
Every time,
and they still are. Maybe not quite as big as they used to be. But after the 98 election, when it was clear that the government here was going to be, on course with European integration and transatlantic integration, we transformed the office here into an office for Central and Eastern Europe. That worked with all the countries from Estonia in the north to Albania in the south, and sometimes with Turkey, which for the United States is sometimes Europe and sometimes not. And then eventually evolved that into an office for all of Europe, which let us work with partner parties in Brussels and in all of the countries of NATO and the European Union.
So from what I remember, and that was the best days because
those were good days.
It was good days, and we spent a lot of time, helping other political parties, center-right political parties in other countries to be more professional, to do more professional campaigns, but also to focus on democratic values. So when we speak about legacy, because you already retired from IRI, and now you can look back and see what happened. How do you see the role in IRI? In what way it helped? In what way it was good?
I think, Michal, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Right? And I think one of the great lessons from that whole period is that politicians in every era, in every place, want to believe that they know everything about everything.
Right.
And any normal individual in the street understands that that is not true. And so one of the things that IRI did, and NDI and our sister organizations, I think did really well, was continue to try to refocus politicians on the idea that they need to go out and actually communicate with normal people.
Right.
Whether that's going door to door or doing, sort of grassroots town hall style meetings, to sort of stay in touch with what people really think, because I have never yet met the party leader who doesn't believe that he or she understands everything about the country.
Right.
And I have also never met one that actually does. So, staying in contact with the people tends to keep you honest.
Yeah.
And I think IRI, with your help, really helped us keep politicians focused on what the people actually want and need, and actually talking to real people. I think the average voter understands that politicians can't do everything. They're not magic. They can't fix everything overnight. The average voter just wants to be listened to and heard. And in the leftist parlance these days, seen. And more politicians who do that, do it well, succeed. And I think, this is sort of where we got President Trump from. He talked to people and heard from people that felt like they hadn't been listened to for a generation.
Yeah, funny you mention it, because you also served as a local councilor, right, in Prečo, Pennsylvania.
17 years.
17 years. That's a lot of experience as well.
A lot of time,
campaigning, right?
Yeah.
And many times when we did this kind of, professional training programs in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Southeastern Europe, and in Turkey, we listened to this kind of, opinions that, this is too American. This is not going to work here. You can keep that for American campaign. And this door-to-door and this, this relationship building is not going to work. So what's changed? Because you started in 94, and here in Slovakia, when you look at the campaigning back in that days, there was no door-to-door here, right? No one wanted to speak with the people. Everyone talked about very, offline kinds of communication, but not direct communication. So they use the billboards, and they spend a lot of budget on billboards, but no personal communication. So how did you manage to change that kind of mentality?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think, again, every generation of party leader believes there's one magic answer. Here in those days, it was billboards. Very often now you hear we have to be on Facebook, or we have to be on some online presence, and then everything's going to be okay. That'll fix everything, right? Well, those things are valuable, right? I'm not saying that they don't have value in a campaign and that they're not worth spending money on in a campaign. But none of it matters compared to actually going out and talking to people. And, I think people will accuse me of being biased in a Slovak context, but if I look at the campaign that Mickey Dzurinda ran in 1998, and people thought it was silly at the time, getting on a bicycle and riding across Slovakia. People laughed at it. But, everywhere he went, people came out and talked to him, and he talked to people. That personal contact, and especially in a country of Slovakia's size, where you can really talk to a very significant part of the population if you spend the time doing it, right? Even in the United States, this is, again, where I think President Trump has been, and I don't agree with everything the president does, but at least in a campaigning sense, he gets out and he lets himself be seen, and he sees people. He was just last week near my hometown in Pennsylvania that you mentioned earlier, and had a huge crowd because people want to come out and see him and hear him and talk to him. And he continues to do that even, now it's not a campaign, right? He does these events regularly because he understands that they want to see him, and he also wants to see them.
Right.
He was at the Army-Navy game, which I know in Slovakia is not a big deal, a big football game. But, in an American context, the president goes to the game between the football teams of Army and Navy and sits on the Army side for one half and the Navy side for the other half so that he can't be accused of being biased. Walks across the field in the middle of the game, right, to show people so that he's with both sides. And all of that establishes a personal connection. And that's the value, for example, of door-to-door campaigning or public rallies or, just being out. You can't sit in the Capitol and expect to win.
Thank you for mentioning Michala Dzurinda's campaign.
Sure.
Because from what I remember, I was a young pupil.
You were a kid.
Yeah, well, not a kid, but I was in the middle school, I think. But what I remember is that it actually energized the people.
Yes.
To see the future prime minister on the bike. It's so unusual that you have to remember it. And since then, I can't remember of any other campaign that even closely resembled that one, right?
It's the one that sticks in my head.
Yeah.
Because it had never been done before and has never been done again. It was, one of a kind. Sui generis, as they say.
Sui generis, yeah. And I'm still advocating with my company, to our clients that door-to-door campaign is the basics. I mean, you can do a lot of online, but first of all, there is this terrain operation that you have to do because that establishes the trust in democracy, right?
Politics, in the end, is about people, right? I mean, when you were with IRI, we would have these seminars we would do for, young people going into politics. And one of the first questions we would ask them is, what's politics about?
Right.
Yeah. And very often they would talk about, big theories and ideas and the clash of concepts and, conservatism versus socialism and all the rest of this, right? No. Politics, when it all comes down to it, is about math, right? Getting more than the other guy gets. And how do you do that? You get more people who believe that you've got the answer, right, than the other guy does or the other person does. And one of the best ways I know to do that is just going out and talking to people, right? And there are too many politicians, I think, Michal, in all parties, in all countries. It's not unique to Slovakia or the United States or any. It's just the way people are. There are too many politicians who really don't like the people very much, and the people feel it. People aren't stupid. They may not be highly educated. They may not be as articulate as you would want the people to be. Yeah. But you know what? They have real jobs and real lives and stuff they've got to get done that doesn't involve politics. And if a politician, if somebody who wants to be successful in politics doesn't understand that he or she needs to get out and just connect with people, then frankly, I don't think they deserve to win. And they certainly don't deserve to represent anybody because they don't know who they're talking about.
Well, there are some politicians who would like to probably, replace people by artificial intelligence right now. But fortunately, it's not going to vote for a while, at least. Last time I checked.
Let's hope not.
But 1998, was the best experience you had from campaigning, or was there something else that happened to you in Slovakia?
Wow. In a Slovak context, 1998 was the best. Yeah. I mean, it was, sometimes you just have these moments in politics. I compare it, for me, in an American context, to the Reagan campaign in 1980.
Right.
When I was young. Yeah. Right. I grew up as a teenager through the Carter administration, which was one of the most abysmal administrations in the history of the United States by any measure.
Then Joe Biden came, right?
Until Joe Biden, which was every bit equally as abysmal. The difference, of course, is that Jimmy Carter actually was in control of his faculties. Right. And his wife wasn't running the White House by the time he ended. But, in those days, it was clear that Carter's presidency had been a failure domestically, politically, economically, a complete crisis. Hostages in our embassy in Iran, so a failure internationally. And Ronald Reagan came along and told everybody and made people believe, which I think was true, that it could be better. And I volunteered for the campaign. It was the first political thing I ever did. I actually got to drive George H.W. Bush, around when they came to Allentown, Pennsylvania to campaign. And I put the 1980 campaign with Reagan in the United States and the 1998 campaign with Dzurinda here in Slovakia kind of together in the same bin. They both spoke to a moment. Both Reagan and Dzurinda had this kind of feeling for where the country was, and knew how to talk to people about it. And, to be honest, and again, you can disagree with many things that President Trump has done, but I think he, in so many ways, caught the spirit of the moment with a large part of the electorate in the United States. I mean, there are 330 million people in the United States. Right. And to be able to find the words and encapsulate the concerns of that large a percentage of the people, that's really a special skill. And not everybody has it. He does.
And still, we are in Slovakia, in Europe, and President Trump is heavily criticized here and seen as somebody who is like out of his faculties to govern the American government, not even the world. So How about this gap, which is like growing between America and Europe? And we just see, a few days ago, this new foreign policy strategy was published by White House, and it's like creating panic all around Europe that United States is like realigning to be on themselves, and Europe is left alone. And you served actually as the director of Transatlantic strategy in IRI for a while. That's right.
That was my last job. Yeah.
Your last job. So, how do you see that? Is it widening, or it's just Donald Trump doing that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Michal. Thank you. I'll say that I spent my entire life. I mean, I married the transatlantic relationship, right? My wife is Slovak.
Yeah.
We have
and
kids.
you are from the big family of Slovak Americans, right?
My family, when we originally left from Eastern Slovakia, people knew they were never coming back. For us now, we go back and forth all the time, right? So there is actually a transatlantic relationship. And I have spent my entire career trying to encourage Europeans to put their strengths together to be able to stand up to the problems that we all collectively face in the world, right? Whether it's economically, politically, now militarily because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to be able to stand up to the Chinese, right? Which I think is going to be the biggest task of the next generation. We'll see whether they're up to it in the United States and America. I hope they are. I want to believe that they are. The transatlantic relationship, the relationship between the United States and the European Union is not what it used to be. And, the national security strategy, almost every administration has a new national security strategy. Right. I've got like 7 of them in my drawer, in my desk. They always cause a lot of angst when they get printed. And when it comes down to what they actually do, we can go back and read them all and be like, oh yeah, that's what they said, right? So I would, first of all, let's not completely burn the house down because of a single document. But does it reflect the idea that there is a dichotomy between our relationship with NATO and our relationship with the European Union? Yes. Let's not forget that just a couple of days before the new national security strategy got published, the EU decided to impose a very large, tens of millions of dollar fine on a major American, internet company. Right. Not the first time. Yeah. Not the last time.
Not the first time, not the last time. Yeah.
So obviously we're competitors economically. I don't think there's any question about that. We have to find a way to manage being competitive economically and being cooperative strategically. On the strategic side, on the military side, Michal, I think Europeans don't want to believe what I'm about to say, but I believe it to be true. America is tired. It's tired of fighting wars all over the world. Small towns like mine, 3,000 people, we contribute the vast majority of the soldiers who go out and fight and die for the United States. It's not liberal East Coast cities like New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. and Miami and West Coast. I don't even talk about that. The people who fight America's battles come from the heartland, and they're tired. Because of Iraq, because of Afghanistan, you can argue about whether we should have been involved, right? I understand that. Those are all debates that can be had. But they're tired. And they want to understand why, if American troops are going to be committed somewhere else in the world, why it makes sense for America. Because looking back, Iran and Afghanistan didn't make much sense. And there's no one back in towns like mine who doesn't know someone who got killed or who came back disabled or mentally incapable of living life. And so again, when President Trump talks about no more forever wars and, expresses concern about commitments in Europe, that's where that's coming from the basis, right? From the grassroots. And I just encourage Europeans to understand that. I'm extremely optimistic about the fact that more and more Europeans are involved in military exercises and the like in Central and Eastern Europe. Germans in Lithuania, for example, these kinds of things. That's all good. And the incipient regrowth of the German defense industry, good thing. Let's promote it. Let's do everything we can. Because America is not going to be able to do this and isn't going to want, frankly, to do this all the time. It's been 80 years. 80 years. And I think there's a sense among the American people, or at least a significant portion of the American people, that they've paid a lot of the bills. And now somebody else probably ought to pay for a little while.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, to say Americans are tired is a very fair argument. And especially for Europe, because, they were under this umbrella for many years, not paying enough for the umbrella.
In my opinion, I agree, yeah.
So some change is needed. But what they obsess about, European politicians now, mostly is that Europe is left alone in fight for Ukraine. And you also have a stake in that fight because, as I know, you are personally involved in helping Ukrainians by moving up ambulances, if I'm correct. So how do you reckon on that? That is Europe really alone? Or is America not seeing that fight being essential for their interests?
There's a couple of different ways to look at that. I think that, the average American, maybe not so much the younger generation, which has grown up since the end of the Cold War, but people above the age, the people that remember the Cold War, we have a certain muscle memory intellectually about what it's like to deal with Russia. Right? You can't make generalizations about a people collectively, just like we can't make generalizations about Germany collectively for what happened in the 20th century. Not every German was complicit, but we know that Russia today, as constituted under Vladimir Putin, is a danger, not only to its neighbors, but also to itself, frankly. And we also know that the way that you stand up to a bully is to stand up to a bully. Right? So this is one of the reasons why personally in my own time and, with our own money, I volunteer to take ambulances to Ukraine because the territorial defense forces there need them and use them. And it's something I can do as a Republican American that has nothing to do with our administration and nothing to do with our government. I think the president has been extremely successful in a number of cases around the world, trying to find a way to bring peace. If you had told me when he was inaugurated in January of this year that the conflict in Gaza was going to be maybe not over, because we all know there's ongoing violence, but compared to where we were 6 months ago, there's nobody else on the planet who could have done what he did in that situation. And what worries me a little bit, maybe a lot, is that Europe was a complete bystander in that process. Irrelevant. Sorry, Europe. I know Keir Starmer was at the press conference. I know Emmanuel Macron was at the press conference. I know all that, right? But irrelevant. And this is my biggest concern about the transatlantic relationship right now. I think Europe, the United States has residual military power, has residual economic power, has the capacity to regenerate its economy in a way that Europe has completely lost. Technologically, economically, innovation now does not happen in Europe. Full stop.
So we have tired Americans and irrelevant Europeans.
It's not a good mix.
when we both started in IRI, and then I started in IRI, and you continued, it was 2006. It was still age of optimism, wasn't it? It was very short after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we were still full of optimism that liberal democracy is going to win all over the world, and even the Middle East countries are going to adopt democracy. So what happened? What happened that we are here in 2025, almost 26, and we are full of pessimism right now?
Nothing is a given. Nothing is a given, right? The whole Francis Fukuyama argument that we had reached the end of history after the Berlin Wall fell and the new democracies were established across Central and Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union fell apart, it was just fundamentally wrong.
Sounds like BS, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, history doesn't. Mark Twain, famous American writer, once said that history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes.
It rhymes, yeah. I agree with that. I can say
and I think we're rhyming. I find all sorts of parallels. Nothing, in my opinion, Michal, in human history, certainly in the modern era, is new. Right? We come to believe that we have reached a plateau which is going to go on forever and which we can see forever to the future. Right? It's not the way life works, and it isn't ever going to work that way. We have to take advantage of those moments while we can, which I think we did. In the post-1989 period. But that period is over. And I think, I love writing statements about transatlantic values that go back to the 50s and 60s, right? But that era is also over. We need to figure out a way to make this thing new. And I think we can. But we have to get past, in Europe at least, we have to get past the idea that everything that President Trump says and does is somehow by definition evil. Right? And we have to get past in the United States the idea that somehow everything that the European Union says and does is socialist. Right? Much of it is.
Much of it is, yeah.
But
being European citizen.
many parts of it are also not. Right?
But talking about rhyming, it reminds me of Reagan in the 80s, who was perceived, especially in Western Europe, as a warmonger, wasn't he?
Oh, my goodness.
And there were these peace demonstrations all around the place, by very, value-driven Europeans who are seeing Ronald Reagan as someone who is like very simpleton and, trying to impose the war on Western Europe. And there was so much wrong.
Michal, can I?
You can.
This is something that rhymes all the time, right? And it drives me to distraction because I'm now 62 years old. I've lived through, I don't even know how many American presidential administrations. I haven't counted them.
Yeah.
When Richard Nixon was in the White House, Europeans hated Richard Nixon. When Ronald Reagan was in the White House, Europeans hated Ronald Reagan. B actor, unqualified, shouldn't have his finger anywhere near the button, etc. Right. When George W. Bush was in the White House, demonstrations, hundreds of thousands of people against W and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
And now when Donald Trump is president, the very same thing. Now, what's common in all of these presidents?
I think they were Republicans.
They were all Republicans.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Odd that there are no similar demonstrations under Democratic presidents, right? Barack Obama is hailed as,
patron saint.
The best thing, and we say in English, the best thing since thin sliced bread, right? Even Jimmy Carter, who was just a horrific president, right? Yeah. Europe loved. Kennedy, obviously, right, with good reason. And then Joe Biden, right, who was, again, evidently incapable. It was Joe Biden and his administration that withheld every significant delivery of new arms to Ukraine as they were fighting the war. That wasn't the Trump administration. It wasn't the Republican Congress.
That's right.
It was the Joseph Biden administration. So, let's just be honest and call things what they are, right? But there is a predisposed antipathy in the United States to Republican administrations.
So maybe they're praying to see Mamdani in the White House one day.
Well, good luck.
Good luck to you then. But
Mamdani is going to be mayor of New York for 4, maybe 8 years. We'll see. And he will drive New York City into the ground. And then somebody else will have to come along to fix it afterwards.
Maybe to the European Union as well.
Well,
but who is going to be the next president after Trump? Who do you think has a chance to replace this legacy?
Yeah, so I think on each side, right? Obviously, the main contender on the Republican side is going to be J.D. Vance, the vice president, who is positioning himself to be the heir apparent.
Right.
Right. I don't know that will go off without a fight. I think Marco Rubio has also put himself in a really good position. People like him. And I think, he's doing a really good job as Secretary of State and the 3 other jobs that he's doing.
Right.
So from my perspective on the Republican side, it's those 2. On the Democrat side, we'll see. I believe the Democratic Party is going through today something very similar to what the Republican Party went through in the Tea Party movement a decade and a half ago.
Right.
Trying to figure out where its core is and where the energy is right now, based on the most recent elections. The energy appears to be on the further left of the party. If that's the direction they choose to go in, then, you bring up people like AOC and Jasmine Crockett and others like that, right? While I think the traditional mainstream of the party would counsel against that. But you know how politics works. There's energy. We only have 2 parties. Right. In the United States, right? We're only ever going to have 2 parties. So you don't have the luxury like you do in Europe of, opting out and going off to a party that's sort of close.
Yeah.
It's all got to happen in one of the 2. And the 2 big parties need to make decisions organically about where the energy is and where the power is going to be. And I think, I could be wrong, but my guess is that the Democrats go pretty far to the left in 2028. Depends on what happens in the midterms in 2026. Right. If the energy is on the left in 2026 and the Democrats do well, then I think it's obvious that's where they're going to go in 2028. I'm not certain that's the case necessarily. I know a lot was made of the Mamdani election and the governor's elections in New Jersey and Virginia and this most recent congressional sort of by-election in Tennessee. But, in my opinion, in those cases, Democrats won where Democrats win and Republicans won where Republicans win.
Yeah.
Whether the margins were as big as I would like to have it be for a Republican win, probably not. But this is for all the people who are arguing that it's the end of American democracy. It seems to me that the institutions are working. When you have the end of democracy, you don't have midterm elections in which the opposition wins, right? But we do.
Yeah.
So. We need to get past the idea that it's the end of democracy when Republicans win, and it's all good for democracy when Democrats win.
Okay, that's the optimistic note I wanted to end on. So
we're born optimists,
Yeah. We have to be. Sometimes we have to force ourselves to be, but now we have a reason to be. Thank you, Jan, for visiting, and I hope we can have you next time comment on midterm elections, which are coming next year, right?
Be happy to come back.
Okay, I'll be happy too.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.